I'm John Fensterwald, writer of the blog Educated Guest and host of the website Top Ed, Thoughts on Public Education in California, a forum on California education policy. Join me while I interview interesting and informed leaders in education. You'll learn a lot in 10 minutes or less. I'm John Fensterwald, columnist for EducatedGuest.org and host of the website Top Ed, Thoughts on Public Education in California. And we're going to resume our conversation with Larry Aceves, who is candidate for public instruction in California. Larry, welcome back again.
Thank you very much, John.
So let's resume where we were. Let's talk about charter schools.
All right.
Does regulation of charter schools need to be strengthened? And do other laws regarding charters need to be changed?
Right. I think the charter school movement, I think as we've moved forward, we've gotten to know a lot more about how effective they are. Certainly, as I've been speaking with people from charter schools, they are concerned about charter schools that are operating and not doing well, and want to make sure that, as superintendent of public instruction, I'm willing to close down charter schools that are not successful, which I've said I certainly am. I believe as well that Prop 39, which was supposed to give charter schools more money for buildings, has been underutilized. And I do have a concern with charter school children who are in schools that are not earthquake safe. I know that we've allowed that to happen, but you know, I'm a student advocate, and I'm concerned when we have children in storefronts and that they're not safe. So I believe if we come back after more bonding, we really need to work to have kids, every one of them, in schools that are safe for them to be in, day out.
So to make sure that districts apportion a certain percentage of their bonds for charter schools representative the portion of charter school children in their district, is that?
Well, that Proposition 39 was very clear that some of their, if they've got new bond money, some portion of it had to go to charter schools.
Right.
I do not believe that's been going on to the degree it ought to, and that needs to be regulated, obviously.
Now, let's turn to budgets and spending, and we all know that schools have, there's been less funding, a lot less funding for schools in California in the last 3 years. So how can districts meet the higher standards that we're asking them to meet with fewer resources?
That's a great question, John. I think what you're seeing are dedicated individuals who, despite the cuts, despite really the program destructions in many cases, have managed to hold it together. My concern is that we're on the skinny branches now, and we cannot continue. We have to get the legislature and the governor to figure out how to fund public education, and we cannot continue to just exist, because many of our programs, the ones that are particularly intervention programs, the adult ed, the career technical education programs that are being decimated, help all of our children. And if we continue to do what we're doing, we're really going to lose a generation of children who are not going to get the same education in California that I received as a young child, and that's that would be a travesty.
So how much should be spent on public education? What should be the goal? Should it be an amount? Should it be, what should we measure? What are the measurements to decide how much we spend?
I think we need to determine what does it take to educate children. You know, the idea that, you know, highly qualified teachers, highly qualified principals, and then what sort of support staff do we need for them? Do we need librarians? Do we need nurses? Do we need psychologists? Do we need the kinds of support that many other school districts on the East Coast seem to enjoy in their schools? Once we determine what it is we need, then we can figure out what do we need to have per child. But just throwing out a figure, I think, is a little reckless, and I think we need to determine what services we need and then determine what they cost.
Now, in many of those areas, the ratio of students per teacher, students per librarian, counselor, California is nearly the last in the nation.
We are in many areas, counselors, librarians, even administrators. The amount of every administrator has as far as teachers to evaluate, children to oversee, we're one of the lowest. I think only Utah is behind us, and that's pretty sad.
Now, the California School Boards Association, Association of California School Administrators, other groups have filed a lawsuit, the Robles-Wong versus State of California.
Right.
So if you were superintendent, what should the approach be to that suit, and what would you do to try and settle, assuming that's a good idea?
Well, I think the idea that those organizations felt that a suit was necessary is indicative of the hard times we're in. I believe we'll have a new governor. It would be my hope to work with the new governor in having talking about the first conversation. What do our schools need? Certainly accountability. Nobody's going to give us money without the idea of we're going to have to show something for it. That needs to be part of the conversation, but it ought to be kind of a holistic conversation. What do we need, and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable for it? I'd love to be in that conversation. I think it's critical to have someone who understands education really as my first love, rather than just kind of being involved as a termed out legislator wanting to get involved.
So you're an elected official, and the governor is a separate, doesn't have to listen to you, but I'm assuming that if you were superintendent, you would give the advice to the governor to try and settle this thing and not fight it?
I would. And it's interesting. As a superintendent, I always worked for an elected board, so I know how to collaborate with people, how to work well with people, and that would be my intent, that the governor and I would have a single goal for what we want for our students.
Right. Now, one way the state could get more money would have been to have won Race to the Top. It would have brought $700 million, not to backfill our budgets, but to carry out a number of reforms that were in the proposal that California submitted. What do you think of Race to the Top, and if there is a third round, do you think the state should try for the money?
Well, certainly I have to acknowledge the 7 major districts who stepped up. I think they did a lot of work behind the scenes with their own communities, with their own with their own teachers' unions, and so I have to applaud them. My concern was that it was not holistically accepted across the state. Of 1,000 districts, I think there were only 300 others who stepped up. So my concern would be, if we're really going to implement this statewide, we need to have the conversation about, is this truly what all of us are going to work behind? Because if we don't, it's going to be tough to do it piecemeal.
Now, it wasn't just the lack of union support that cost us points. We had a data system that is not functioning well and behind other states. But would you advise unions that would you encourage them to sign up with the Race to the Top with their superintendents and school boards?
Well, I think one of the things that will be important for us to make a determination is what kept them out of it. I think there are issues such as merit pay that they were very concerned about, and I'm to some degree concerned about it as well. I think if those are the kinds of things we'll have to overcome with the federal government to see if we're still eligible, if that keeps us from being considered.
One more aspect on funding. Do you think that poor students should get or needy students, special education, English learners should get a higher ratio of money than other students, sort of a weighted formula?
I'm actually a fan of the weighted formula. I think all students ought to be funded equally as a base, and then added on for special needs, special education, transportation, those sorts of things.
Good. Well, thank you, Larry. We've enjoyed our conversation. Good luck in November 2nd is the election, and all of our watchers should vote, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.